We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to This Song Is Yours, the podcast where we explore the art of songwriting, celebrate incredible artists, and dive deep into the stories behind their music. I'm your host, Simon Fink, and as always, thank you for joining us. Our guests today on the podcast are Chicago-based guitar pop trio Beach Bunny. Originally launched as a solo project by frontwoman Lili Trifilio, the band have grown into a powerhouse of upbeat power pop and indie rock. With multi-platinum singles, critical acclaim, and viral hits like Cloud9 lighting up TikTok, Beach Bunny have really carved out a beloved space within the modern indie landscape. This week, they're returning with their third studio album, Tunnel Vision, a stunning collection that sees the band lean back into their guitar-driven roots after experimenting with some synth textures on their previous release. In today's episode, though, we're speaking with Lili Trifilio about Tunnel Vision and the importance of taking time to reset creatively before diving into a new record. We chat about working with producer Sean O'Keefe, who has worked with bands like Fall Out Boy and Motion City Soundtrack, what it's like treating the studio like a 9-to-5 job, and the conscious shift back towards a more guitar-forward sound. We're also going to dive into the emotional depth of one of the album highlights, Violence. Now we want to say a massive thank you to Alison and Claire for their help with today's episode. Tunnel Vision, the new album from Beach Bunny, is out later this week, and you will find links within the show notes on where you can purchase the record and check out all of their upcoming US tour dates. While you're in the show notes, we want to make sure that you're also following us across all of our socials and subscribing to this very podcast. We've had some stellar guests this year, and that is not going to change, so please make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. Now let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Lili Trifilio from Beach Bunny. Please welcome to This Song Is Yours from Beach Bunny. It is Lili Trifilio. Lili, hello. How's it going?
Hi, it's going great. I'm out in Columbus, Ohio right now.
What is it like in Ohio, in Columbus, during April of the year?
Pretty miserable, honestly. But we're on the first stop of our tour, so I'm excited.
Look, very, very exciting. I know at the moment you guys, you are in the starting leg of like what is quite a lengthy tour, I believe, which I want to kind of touch on in a little bit. But it is in support of a brand new Beach Bunny record, which is super exciting. It's called Tunnel Vision. It is out later this week when people are listening to our chat. But firstly, congratulations on this beautiful record. How are you feeling and how is the band feeling with it finally coming out?
Thank you so much. I mean, it's been a long time coming. So I think we're both, a mix of excitement and a little bit nervous to be releasing music after so long, but mostly just excited.
Of course. It has been, I think, 3 years since the last record?
Yeah, just about.
How have you found the downtime between? Because I know that a lot of people obviously talk about there's touring, there's once you put a record out, there's so many kind of other things that then fall into place following that. Taking a bit of a break and stopping, what was that experience like? Because I guess that doesn't get focused on too much. Were you able to reset? Were you able to kind of, feel a little bit more human again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a quote by somebody that like the essence of it is kind of if you don't make time to take a break, your body eventually will force you to take one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what kind of happened coming off the tail of the last record. Even though I was eager to kind of just keep going, I sort of struggled with some writer's block for a little while and kind of needed to step away and just get back to life. And in doing that came the record pretty quickly after I took a proper break. So I'm glad to be back and feeling creative again.
I'm very glad that you're back. And I know that there's a lot of people that are glad that you're back as well. We mentioned to one or two colleagues today who we were chatting to this morning, and they were very excited that there's a brand new record coming out. Has there been, a lot of fan anticipation from your perspective, from the band's perspective, when it does come time to put out a record? can you sense the anticipation or the excitement from the community and from fans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have been incredibly patient for a bit now, and I just feel so lucky and grateful that everyone's stuck around for so many years. You know, from when we were like just a DIY band in Chicago, through an entire pandemic. So it's really cool to be kind of on the other side of all that and still have fans of all ages.
Which I think is a sign of, obviously, of the quality of the output of the band. I think that it's really exciting that there is a brand new record today, and hoping to, kind of dive into Tunnel Vision with you. I know that we've spoken about the previous record, which was 2022's Emotional Creature, and I think that there's a cliche in songwriting or in putting out music in albums that it's always like the difficult second album, if you will, that's kind of what they... I'm curious, as this is the third, I know that you mentioned writer's block, and I want to touch on that a little bit as well, but once that had alleviated, did you find that this was easier than the second? Does the cliche live up to the hype, or is it something that this was just as difficult as that second record?
I don't know if it was just as difficult. It was definitely different. I think that this record gets kind of back to the basics in a lot of way. And sort of what you said with the sophomore album was kind of trying to explore some new sounds. And I think what I was just consuming a lot was very different than what I normally listen to. So still satisfied with that record. But it was weird kind of knowing where Beach Bunny was headed. And I think that maybe on this album, we've mastered the Beach Bunny sound.
Mm-hmm. I do love that. I think that, do you think that from having that reset and stopping a little bit and kind of working through the other side of the musician, which is the human side, that's maybe where the sonics kind of came from, almost like a return to form. There are a lot of guitars on this record, and it does sound very different from that second record. It's still a few little synths. I think there was, what was it? There's like a lovely little run in cycles at the end of the record, which has some keys and synths, which I loved. But yeah, it is predominantly like back to the guitars, which I think works really well for this record. Did you find that was a decision that you made, or that it just came organically from kind of going back and resetting and starting that songwriting process again from the beginning?
Yeah, I think the reset was incredibly helpful. If I look back, the sophomore album was mostly written during lockdown. So I think that just kind of forced the whole process to be like its own thing. We never got to have a band practice before we hopped into the studio. So a lot of experimenting went down, but, we didn't really think about how we'd play stuff live, for instance. And with this record, I think the focus was a lot on like, just kind of having fun as a band and reflecting on, where am I at? Where's the state of the world at? And just finding new topics to write about too, which I think was really helpful. I think maybe for a little while, I felt Beach Bunny had to be its own thing in a certain box. And in a weird way, we kind of got back to some of our core sounds by just sort of having fun and not worrying too much.
100%. Did you find that the way that you songwrited, what is the correct? Anyway, did you find that the way that you then wrote songs kind of changed once that, not even pressure, but maybe it was a pressure, but that preconceived notion that you were able to write about other things that weren't like heartbreak, that you could write about the world around us, did that change your perspective or maybe how you then approached songwriting for the record?
Yeah, I think definitely. It was really helpful kind of not putting myself in the box of only talking about relationships, which had been the focus of the last two records. And I think with that like this record started with a lot of just lyrics to paper, just kind of ideas and brainstorming. And I think the biggest difference from my songwriting perspective was just a lot of things came organically without me needing to like know the chords in advance. Like a lot came from just singing in my car and seeing what happened, or kind of like composing in my head, which is something I've never been able to do before. I think just since we've been a band for a while now, and maybe I'm more locked into to playing guitar. I just felt like I could do more because I was like capable of more, which is cool to see.
I think that it's something that we've spoken to a few different songwriters on this podcast about in terms of that, the I guess the almost like the muscle of songwriting, in terms of that it's something that is, for some songwriters, they develop that muscle and then they just kind of stick to what they do and what they know, and that is fine, and each to their own kind of art form. And then there are some who build upon it and grow and, advance how they approach what they do. And I think that it's really interesting when you are able to either change things up or advance or learn or re-educate yourself to be able to do new things, and, like, as you said, like compose in your head, which I imagine is kind of like a wild experience when you're doing it for the first or second time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had friends that kind of mentioned, they have different songwriting processes, but I was very used to like, okay, I have to sit in my room with a guitar to make anything. But I found a lot of these songs were kind of made in odd places, like in a grocery store. I would just start to have like a melody in my head, or walking, down the beach or something like that. So it's really just like grabbing those moments, usually in a phone recording, and then kind of just workshopping them and chiseling away more and more. And it was really cool. And I think another core thing that was a huge difference is we went from a 4-piece to a 3-piece. So, that definitely in some ways added pressure, but in some ways, like, it kind of opened a new door in a lot of sense.
100%. I imagine that there's obviously some things that are lost, but then some things that are gained by changing the dynamic of the band members. I was wondering whether you might indulge me, and please tell me if not, if you'd like to change the subject. But before, there was writer's block mentioned, which I think is something that is more common than people think when it does come to whether it be songwriting, whether it be writing a novel. I think that people do have parts of time where there is like a for lack of a better word, a block that prevents them from kind of moving forward. And I know that you mentioned that it was kind of stemmed from the constant touring and the being on the road and everything else, and requiring a bit of a break. I'm curious if you're able to talk to it, the process of realizing that you had writer's block, and then maybe how you're able to address it and move on from it. Because I think it's a thing that everyone has a different method of how they get over that hurdle, and wondering if you're able to share that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately it came down to just focusing on consuming instead of creating for a little while. Even though I was in the mood to make things, I just kept finding that it would just make me more and more frustrated. So when I actually let myself, have a couple months where I really wasn't thinking about Beach Bunny or like making anything for work, maybe just creating in my own personal life for fun, listening to some great albums, watching some great movies, it kind of organically came back. So for me, that was my process. And I didn't really go into it super intentionally. It kind of was like, well, nothing else is working, so maybe I should just pause. And thankfully, that's exactly what I needed. And I've definitely, heard that from other musicians, that it's like important to be bored and important to have life experiences that you can write about. So yeah, I think that's where it started, at least.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that, yeah, the fact that it has then allowed you, as mentioned before, to look at different subject matter and talk about different things on the record that are outside of what was previously discussed on other Beach Bunny records. There was one track that I'm hoping you might indulge me in and talk a little bit about. My favorite track on the record. There's obviously a lot of things going on in the world in 2025 and and in the world around us. I loved the track Violence. I thought that there was this beautiful balance that you've done in this track of the verses and the subject matter are like somewhat serious when you kind of like read them and looking at what's going on in the world today. And then I think that the chorus is juxtaposed in a way that is a little bit lighter and the chords are like major chords. It kind of shifts the mood like in this. It's done masterfully. So congratulations on the song, and especially the what is it? The chord arrangement, the chord progression in the second half of the chorus is just chef kiss. It's almost like a very classic kind of Anyway, we'll make sure that people have links in the show notes to listen to the record so they know what I'm talking about. But wondering if you might be able to talk to us about Violence and how that track kind of came to be.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It is quite a heavy track in a lot of ways. And I think, like, as many of us, feel an obligation to be, everybody's watching the news, everybody's locked into the news cycle. I live in Chicago, and, that's a constant stream of violence in my own neighborhood. And I felt like it was necessary to talk about, not really even in a preachy way, but more in just a matter of fact way. This is happening and we're all in this together and witness to this. And it's kind of unfortunate. And it did make me kind of, I've been sort of navigating it like an existential crisis, which is sort of what the album's about in general. And I think as the latter half of the album goes on, it gets from like a more personal relationship with myself to kind of, okay, well, what's the relationship with me in the world? Like, why are we all struggling with these mental health issues? What's going on in society? So, I definitely wanted to cover some topics and hopefully bring some awareness to some complicated discussions.
I think that the song has definitely done that, but it's in a way that doesn't seem, I think sometimes if you, and not you yourself as Lily, you as like a songwriter, get too bogged down sometimes in the almost depressing nature of the subject matter. Sometimes the song can just be all doom and gloom. And I think that this track avoids that in terms of bringing some certain kind of levity to it with the chorus and the chords that are within the chorus, so that it's still quite hopeful as well, I guess.
Good. I'm glad it comes off that way.
I'm wondering, Lily, whether you might be able to share with us, as you've probably guessed by what we're talking about, we are a songwriting podcast, the introduction for yourself to songwriting, when you first kind of found songwriting and what got you into it, and I guess how you then developed into putting out your own music.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had been in choir and taken guitar lessons and stuff in grade school. And then in high school, I was really into like relearning all my favorite songs on guitar and just making covers with me and my friends. But it wasn't really till college that I stepped into it more seriously. And I think it's a huge thanks to the people I was surrounded with when I first entered school, that were all in some kind of creative field, a lot in the local music scene. And they really encouraged me to, just go for it. And there was a winter break my freshman year that I had 6 weeks off and a ton of free time and no homework. And I decided, okay, well, I want to see if I can do it, and kind of make this a 6-week project. And then, the rest is kind of history. And yeah, we're actually coming up on like the 10-year Beach Bunny anniversary. So I feel very lucky to have done this for almost a decade.
Does it feel like it's been a decade in a way? Is it weird to look back and feel like that was almost like a decade ago?
In some ways, it's kind of weird because, the pandemic sort of came in the middle of a lot of Beach Bunny's success. So that definitely messes with my perception of time. But yeah, I guess if I think of it like in terms of my studies, that does seem about a decade ago.
Look, that's a very fair point. I do forget that obviously while time still passed, the pandemic kind of pushed 2 or 3 years into a year or into like a bit of a weird time vacuum. So I think that's very, very fair. I was wondering whether you might be able to talk to us about that, like with the making of this new record. You worked with Sean O'Keefe, who is also a Chicago native, I believe.
Yeah, he's so awesome.
I know that he's worked with Fall Out Boy, Motion City soundtrack, and I believe obviously the previous record, Emotional Creature. What made Sean the right fit this second time round for Tunnel Vision?
I definitely knew I wanted to do some guitar heavy tracks. It just seemed like it was shaping out that way in the demoing stage. And Sean is definitely a master at that kind of sound. And it was also really awesome having someone in Chicago that we could just drive to. It kind of felt like having maybe more of like a 9-to-5 day job built into our routine, which was really awesome. And he's got like a killer studio out in Evanston. And it was just a great place for ideas to fly. And yeah, I'm so grateful he was free to help us make this record and super satisfied with how it turned out. He's a great friend as well.
That's awesome to hear. I did read somewhere, I think, that the way that you're able to do it this time around was a little bit less like having to rush things in the studio, and you could almost treat it like a bit of a 9-to-5, like where you were able to put tools down and pick up the next day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. In a lot of ways, I think it was necessary, moving to a 3-piece. It was a little bit of a learning curve. Anthony, the bassist, he took on like guitar as well. And we sort of shared some of the responsibility of writing leads, which was a new experience. And yeah, it was just a great way to kind of rediscover our sound. And we also parted ways with our previous label. So there wasn't like a whole lot of pressure on a deadline other than what we were setting for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Which I think is almost a nice way to do it. There's like a sense of that you're only on your own clock at that point. You can kind of take the time that you want to make the record that you want.
Absolutely. And I think with that time too, it really gave the opportunity for new songs to blossom and grow too. We sort of split the record in half, where we finished 5 and then toured during the summer and came back and did another 5. And by the time we were on the second half, I had new songs that like replaced some of maybe what I would deem the more filler demos. Yeah. So I'm kind of glad that we had that break to just workshop and really like deliver the best 10 songs we could.
I absolutely love that. Well, no, it is an incredible record, Lili. So you've done very well. And yourself and the band should be very proud of it. It's called Tunnel Vision. As mentioned at the top of this conversation, you're currently on tour. For full disclosure to people listening, we are recording a few weeks before the record is coming out. So you would have been on tour for a few weeks by the time people are listening to this. And yourself and the band are on tour, I believe, from having a look at the dates, most of April, most of May, I think parts of June across the US. And we'll make sure that we've got links in today's show notes for people to buy tickets to those US shows. Curious as to whether there's a certain track from this new record that you're either currently loving playing live or that you're looking forward to debuting live if you haven't already.
Definitely Just Around the Corner is a all band favorite. It's really fun to play live.
I absolutely love that. I do have to kind of ask because there's also some European dates, I believe, booked in for October. As mentioned at the top of, before we were recording, we are based in Australia. I might be just fishing or maybe even manifesting at this point. Can we maybe expect some Australian dates, maybe somewhere this year, maybe even somewhere next year in support of the new record?
I mean, that would be amazing. Hopefully top of next year. Seems like that could be in the works.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. Very excited for potential dates whenever they may come, but also just very excited to see how this US and European tour go, because I'm sure that there are so many people excited to be able to kind of firstly see the band play, but also enjoy this new album and kind of see these songs in the live arena. So it is very exciting. As mentioned, we'll have all details in the show notes. Lily, we usually wrap things up by asking our guests what they're currently listening to. For yourself, is there anything that's on high rotation at the moment?
Ooh, I've been really into, I'll say 2 records. There's a new album by Annie DeRusso that's super duper good. Little rockin', little heavy. It's very pop. She's an amazing singer. And I've also really been enjoying the new Magdalena Bay record, which has some really fun synth stuff.
Mm-hmm. I'm not across the first record, but can agree with the Magdalena Bay record, but we'll check out the Annie record and kind of get into it. It's one of the reasons why we ask is so that we can hear new music and kind of get into it that way.
Awesome.
Lily, thank you very much for coming to chat with us on the podcast. The album is Tunnel Vision. It is by Beach Bunny. It is going to be out later this week. You'll be able to pre-order it, buy the record, buy tickets to their shows, follow them on socials within the show notes. But Lily, thank you again for coming to chat with us.
Thank you so much for having me.